Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. MBOM is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at MBOM, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mastering the Business of Yoga, or MBOM. I'm Amanda, and I'll be your host for today's episode of the show. And I'm really excited. We're on episode 4 of our send-off series, and today we're talking all about yoga studios. And this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I've worked closely with yoga studios for many, many, many years. In fact, I've been working for yoga studios longer than I've actually been a yoga teacher. I started my first official studio management role about a year before I started teaching, and I just feel really passionate about supporting yoga studio owners and having more studios thrive and survive and all that goodness. So I'm really excited to dive in with you here today, whether or not you're exploring the idea of what it might like to be to own a studio or to open a studio, or if you're a studio owner who just needs a little bit of support and help and guidance. But before we get there, I just wanted to give context if you're new here or if this is your first episode and you're like, what is going on? This episode is part of a 5-part send-off series. So these are going to be the final episodes of MBOM, at least for now. We're closing the door on this chapter, on this podcast. And if you'd like to go back in the send-off series, you can hear a little update from me and what's going on. We've got an episode that's for new yoga teachers, talking all about how to actually get jobs once you've got your yoga teacher training. And then I've got another episode all about expanding your offerings outside of group classes. So really how to create sustainable income as a yoga teacher, how to create a sustainable business. And then the last episode that we released is all about teaching online. So if you're excited about the prospect of taking a part of your business or all of your business online, then that episode is definitely for you. And this week we're talking about yoga studios, and next week we have one final topic in our send-off series. So I'm really excited to be here with you and to be diving in. So let's get started. Have you ever dreamed of having your own yoga studio but just didn't know where to begin? I very much understand this because opening a yoga studio is hard work. And I think that the first step of this, if you're thinking about this or if you're kind of on the path of exploring this, is it's really important to connect to your deeper why. And this has to be a why that is beyond profit. So if you're just looking to make some profit or have more consistent income, of course, that's a legitimate reason to want to open a business or want to open a yoga studio specifically. But I think that knowing that this is going to be a hard journey along the way, it's important to really connect to that deeper why. So what is your why for wanting to do this beyond just wanting to have your own business or wanting to make more sustainable income? Do you want to serve your community? Do you want to create a consistent home for your offerings? Do you want to build a brand, a legacy, or a lifestyle business? Do you want to have more control over your schedule? What is the why for wanting to do this? It's also really important to get clear on your vision and your mission. So what kind of studio do you want to open? What is the vibe? What is the niche or specialization, and what will make your studio different? It's really important to consider what is already around you, and we'll talk about this in a little bit when it comes to market research, but also just thinking about, what makes your studio unique. And when it comes to niche and specialization, sometimes I think we can get in our heads about doing something that nobody else is doing, and that's not necessarily the case. It's thinking about what is going to set you apart from other studios. And this doesn't have to be something that's huge and groundbreaking. This can be something super simple. So, if you're not too sure what exactly your niche or specialization or what makes you and your studio different is, maybe ask some of your students or ask some of the people in your life, what about me is different? What makes me unique? Because we all have our unique flavor. And I see this when I teach in teacher trainings. So, when I teach yoga teachers the business of yoga and teacher trainings, I give them all the same assignments, and every single assignment comes back different. That is the unique offering. That is the unique flavor that you offer. So, it's figuring out and putting your finger on what that will be with your studio, what's going to set you apart. So, the next thing that I want to dive into is legal structure. So, it is really, really important and best practice to get professional advice on this, but you really want to think about what you want to do with this legally. So, do you want to open an LLC? Do you want to have a sole proprietorship? Are you going to have a corporation for your yoga studio, etc.? It's important to actually sit down, research each of these in your area, so the country you're in, the province or state that you're in, the city or town that you're in, and actually look at like what this is going to look like. What is it going to look like in terms of my protection? How is it going to set me up? And what is it going to look like financially? What is it going to cost me to do this? And is there something where maybe I'll start with an LLC or sole proprietorship and then I'll move into a corporation, after a couple of years? All that type of stuff is really important to research. And we're not going to go into depth with this just because it's a little bit complex depending on where you are. Things are very different legally. So, again, just something to keep in mind, something to be doing some research on. And this is the type of stuff that needs to happen before you actually find the place and set things up. This is just the research phase. So, starting with your why, getting clear on your vision and your mission, starting to do some research into what type of legal structure you want. And then the next thing, which I already alluded to, is market research. So market research is super important before you get started. You want to kind of be looking into your area. What other yoga studios are there around? What are they offering? Are you wanting to offer something similar? Are you wanting to offer something different? Asking your people, what are they interested in? How long do they want to practice for? What times are they interested in practicing in? What types of classes and when? Because it's not just having a beautiful space that is in a great location with convenient parking. We'll talk about all of that as well. But, that is important. But it's also what types of classes do you have running and at what times? Are people able to make those times easily? Are people interested in those types of classes? Because sometimes, say you set up a yin yoga class at 12 p.m. and people are like, well, I don't really want to do yin on my lunch hour. So instead they go to the gym or they go to a different fitness class or a different yoga studio because they want, something that gets their blood moving on their lunch hour. Versus say you have power yoga at 8:30 at night and people are like, I don't want to work this hard at night. That's when they want the yin class. So this is the type of thing where you can start polling your people. You can send out surveys. You can talk to people one-on-one. You can ask people for a few minutes of their time, take them to coffee, pick their brains. You can do polls on social media. There's lots of ways to reach out to people. So just making sure that you're really asking these questions and then beginning from there to sort of create a schedule and get a sense for what that would look like. The next thing we need to consider is budgeting. So thinking about what would the startup cost be. This will include things like a lease, possible renovations in your space, buying props, a website, and all the other software that comes with that. And I think it's really important to remember that all of these things are going to cost money, particularly a lease and any fit outs that you have to do in your space. And then for props, it's not just going to be hey, I'm doing privates at somebody's house and I maybe need a couple of bolsters and a couple of blocks. No, you have to set up an entire studio space. You have to have mats. You have to have all the other things that people need. So there's lots that can go into that. So doing a bit of research on that and just starting to put together a rough budget. What is that going to cost? The next thing is gathering together. What are your monthly expenses going to be? So this is going to be things like rent, utilities, staff, any maintenance that has to be done on the space or any other monthly payments that you have to make. But I think the biggest overhead is going to be the rent, the utilities, and your staff. And sometimes putting together this rough budget can be a little bit challenging, especially if you don't know what space you're going to be in yet. But I think that if you start looking at a few areas that you're interested in and you start just doing some research on how much rent costs for these types of spaces, like a space that would be big enough for what you want, then you'll get a sense for like how much you'll have to pay per month. You can get a sense for how much utilities will be. And then if you're starting to kind of put together that rough schedule and you figure out like, okay, what am I going to teach versus what is somebody else going to teach? How much am I going to pay my teachers? Then you'll know how much you'll need for that. And then, of course, you need other people to come in. Somebody needs to clean the studio. So, are you going to get a team of karma cleaners that get memberships in exchange? Or are you going to bring in professional cleaners? Or what are the expectations with that? Thinking about anyone else that you might need, like front desk management, anyone to help you with administration, digital marketing, that type of thing. So, just putting that into your rough budget as well. And then I think from there, you want to do some revenue projections. So, how much can you make off of classes, memberships, workshops, privates, and other offerings? So, this is where you're going to sit down and really make a business plan. So, you're going to think about how many classes am I going to offer per week, roughly? How much is it going to cost for each of the membership options? So, you probably want to set something up like drop in, and then 5 or 10 punch pass, and then there a monthly membership, and then probably something like a monthly unlimited that renews month to month. Are you going to have, a trial price as well that people can book? So from there, just thinking about, okay, how many people do I have to have in classes to actually make this work? Your group classes will be what's going to be bringing in the majority of your people. And then thinking about from there, what other type of offerings do I want to have to offset this? Do I want to have a workshop every weekend? How many privates am I going to bring in? And privates are really great with yoga studios because they can fill that sort of dead space in the schedule, because often studios have like an early morning class, kind of a mid-morning class, a lunchtime class, a sort of after work, early evening class, and then like another class, maybe like 7:30, or maybe you have a 7 and an 8 o'clock or a 7 and an 8:30. But how many classes is that per day? That's like 5 or 6 classes a day. So we do have chunks of time in there where, people are often at work or people are in school and that type of thing. So they're not really coming to classes, but there are people who do have availability for private. So maybe you can fill some of that time there. So just kind of sitting down with that budget and really looking at like, what are things going to cost? What are the initial costs that I need? What is it going to be month to month? And approximately how much I can make. And hopefully from there, you're looking at making a profit so that you can actually pay yourself. Because I think that this is one of the biggest things when it comes to opening a studio is like, hey, you're going to be busting your butt, wearing a ton of different hats. Are you actually able to pay yourself more than just like the classes that you're teaching? Be nice to get paid, or have like a savings account with a little bit of monthly revenue coming in. That's what we're striving for. So the next thing that we want to consider when it comes to setting up a yoga studio or getting started opening a studio is location. Your location and your space is huge. This is a huge, huge part of this whole decision-making process and just determining if you're going to actually do this. And then I think this has a lot to do with the success of the studio as well. So a couple considerations when you're choosing a location. So visibility is going to be huge. Is it easy to see? Is it easy to find? Can people park there? Is parking easy for people? Do you get much foot traffic in this space? Like, is it on a main street where people could be like, oh, cool, there's a yoga studio here. Like, I should go check this out. Or is it kind of tucked away where there's not a lot of foot traffic? How's safety in the area? Are people going to feel safe walking by themselves at 6 in the morning or, 8 p.m. at night? Are their cars safe if they park? Or is there the chance of vandalism or people breaking in or trying to steal? How is safety? What is the cost? This is huge, obviously, because we could have like the best foot traffic and the most beautiful space with the best, beautiful windows and natural light and all the things, but if this costs too much and you have to have, 30 people in every single class in order to like pay the rent and pay your teachers, then this is going to be very challenging, right? So we have to find something that has that balance of a cost that is going to work for us and also has all those other things like great visibility, good parking, some foot traffic, safety. Safety is going to be very important. And this is going to depend on where you live, right? If you're kind of in a big major city or if you're in a small town. And then just the overall vibe of the space. So when you walk in, can you picture how it would be set up? And so a lot of retail spaces aren't set up for yoga studios unless you're taking over a lease or a space that was previously a yoga or a fitness studio. But can you see it? Can you see like a check-in counter? Can you see some change room spaces? Can you see like a big, nice space where people could practice? You know, what is the overall vibe? Does it feel like it's a good space to come in and practice yoga? Because I do think that while all those other things are important, the energy of the space is also really important because people are coming here for their yoga practice. And that's going to be a huge factor is like, what is the vibe of the space? And then if you can kind of picture it and you can see the vibe and stuff, this comes back to those startup costs, like to create that, how much is that going to cost? So not only considering like what is going to be required with renting or purchasing the space and how much is that going to cost, but in order to create the space that you're actually looking to create, what is going to be involved with that. So maybe just bringing somebody in who could do the renovations or the outfit of the space and getting like a general sense for those costs, I think is really important. And the studio that I worked for in, my hometown in Alberta for many, many years had so many of these things going for it. It's on the main street in the town, great visibility. There's a parking lot right behind it. It was free up until a couple of years ago, which was great. There's also some like off side street parking, which makes it really easy. Because it's on a main street, there's a ton of foot traffic, but it's kind of cool because it's actually up a set of stairs and on the second floor of a building. So it doesn't get people like staring in the window while people are practicing yoga, because that's something people don't love. People don't love to be like stared at or oogled at while they're actually practicing. And there is actually a Pilates studio really close to where I live here in Mexico. And they're in this plaza by like a ton of different restaurants and stuff and a couple of shops. And so people are often like walking around there. And when people are practicing, they just have these big glass windows and you can just see them doing their workouts. And I always feel like it's a tiny bit uncomfortable when you're walking by because naturally you look, right? And I'm always like, oh, I kind of wish they had a bit more privacy. So stuff like that can make a difference. And then this studio is it's in a small town, it's in a very safe area, and, the cost is affordable for the studio, but they get a ton of foot traffic because people are like, oh, there's a yoga studio here, I should check out the schedule. And even though it's upstairs, there's a door downstairs on the front and the back of the studio, and the schedule is up there on a poster. And so people are able to easily see the website. They're able to see the schedule without having to make too much effort. And I feel like all of that really has helped the studio in having a lot of success. So those are all just things to kind of consider as you're looking for spaces and just kind of deciding, what space is right for you. And then once you actually find the spaces that you're interested in, it's really important to be talking with the landlord and negotiating the terms and conditions and making sure that the contract feels like a good fit for you. And I think another thing that's really important when you're choosing a space for a yoga studio, especially if it's not a standalone space, which in most cases it's probably not going to be, is really understanding the spaces around you, what's beside you on either side, what's above you or below you, and just making sure that there's going to be no conflicts with both what you're doing in the studio and the hours you're going to be there and what other people are doing in their businesses. I think that it's really important to make sure that you can kind of live in peace and harmony with your neighbors and them same with you. So if you're going to be doing anything that might be loud, where people are making a lot of noise on the floor. In general, we don't do this a lot with yoga, but maybe you're going to be doing like ecstatic dance on Friday nights or once a month or something like that. Is there something below you that might be bothered by this? Or is there something beside you that can't have music that's going to kind of affect you. And I've seen this a lot with various spaces that I've worked with or worked in where, we're above something and we have to be very cautious about the noise we're making below, or we're below and, there's noise coming from above. And if there's noise coming from above or below, specifically above, that can be really distracting if you're doing things like meditation or in shavasanas, or if you have yoga nidra classes or things like yin or restorative classes. And another example of like neighbors not really working was the dance studio that I danced at in high school. She rented the one space, and all of the classes are basically like 4 p.m. onwards into the evenings, you know, Monday to Friday. And then on the weekends, basically like all day. And the business beside that rented was something that required a little bit more like quiet hours. And so when we would come in there and have the music quite loud and stuff for the classes, there was often complaints happening. And so in the end, she ended up renting that space too, so that we had the two studio spaces, because just soundproofing and creating a sound barrier was just basically impossible. And so it is really important to just be asking those questions and maybe even visiting the space at various hours just to get a sense for what it's like at all hours of the day. And this is something that we often don't consider, especially if we just go at a time where it's really nice and it's really quiet and maybe you don't hear or see anything else around. And so just definitely something to consider, especially if you do have like any noise that you're going to be making or any noise from your neighbors, just how that's going to impact the overall vibe of the studio and just making sure that that'll flow well. So, another thing that we need to talk about is studio design. I think that this is really important. And maybe this is kind of your area of genius, your zone of genius, strengths that you have. Maybe it isn't. So, you're going to bring somebody in. And if you are going to be bringing somebody in or having support from like a designer, an interior designer, an architect, if you're going to be doing renovations, I feel like it'd be really important to bring this person in before you've signed the contract. Like if you're looking at the space, you're like, this is the space I'm thinking, this is the vision I have. Like, is this all feasible? And the things that we want to consider when it comes to studio design are things like flooring. So often we want to have, special floors, maybe a rubber floor or a soft wooden floor, something where people are able to comfortably practice yoga. I think that this is really important, is that we're not on floors that are too hard or too soft, something that's not going to get super damaged or worn out over time. The second thing would be lighting. So making sure that you've got the appropriate lighting. Having lights on a track so that you can dim the lights, I think is really important. Having softer lighting, I think is really important. Having lots of natural light if you can. I think studio spaces that don't have the ability to have natural airflow or natural lighting just don't feel as like fresh and vibrant and airy. And obviously if you're doing hot yoga, it's going to be completely different, but that's like a whole different thing that you'll need to consider and, talk through with landlords and people you're renting with, just to make sure that you can heat the space in that way. Similarly is going to be ventilation. Is there the ability to ventilate the space? And particularly depending on what your climate is like, do you need to be able to air condition the space during the hotter months? Do you need to be able to heat the space during the colder months? If you have a space that doesn't have this ventilation flow, what's that going to look like? Because maybe you go at like a perfectly climatized day and it doesn't feel too hot or too cold, but do you get sun coming in there? Does it really heat up? Do you need fans? What does all that look like? I think that that's a big consideration. And then we talked about this before, but props I think are really important. And I think it's also important to consider, where are you going to store the props? Are you going to set up shelving for them? Is there going to be a closet where they're going to be tucked away? What is that space going to look like? And is there space for that? And then sound system. Is there a sound system already in place in there? Is it going to be easy to set one up? Can you play music in the space? Like we talked about before, does this impact the neighbors and the people around you? That's going to be huge. And then, of course, change rooms and washrooms or restrooms are going to be huge. Is there a space where you can build out a change room? Do people need to go to the washroom? What does that look like? Is it a shared bathroom in the building? Do they have to go up and down stairs? Do they need keys? Like just thinking about like what the flow is going to be like if somebody, from the time that somebody arrives. So you want to think about what somebody's experience is going to be like driving there, parking, getting out of their car, getting into the studio. You want to consider the flow of traffic of people taking off their shoes and their jackets and storing their stuff somewhere. And if they need to change their clothes, where do they do that? And then they're going to roll out their mat. How does that whole thing look in the space? They grab their props. Is that very easy and understandable for them? And then they need to go to the bathroom before the class starts. Is that going to be very simple? Do you have like bathrooms and showers in the change rooms? Is there just one spot for them? And often this is not stuff that we can always control. It's just how the space is, and there might be the washrooms where the washrooms are and all that type of stuff, but it's just stuff that you need to think about and consider so that you can understand what that experience is going to be like for people when they arrive, to make sure that it feels like a good flow for them and just feels like a good vibe, so that people aren't like, oh, this is really like awkward or uncomfortable. So, something else you want to think about is, how will you create a sacred and welcoming space? Like, how do you turn the space into a very yogic space? Is it the colors that you paint with, or the floor that you create? Is it the curtains that you set up, or is it having a mural on the wall? Is it the props and all that type of stuff that kind of create that? Are you doing incense? Are there a lot of plants in it? Do you have mirrors? Just kind of thinking about like, how do I actually create this like yoga studio space? And I think that this is where we have to be a little bit creative often with these like industrial kind of retail spaces, is like, do you see the vision for it? And if you do, is that all possible? And then how do you really turn just like the nice space into something that has the energy that you want to create? So just all stuff to consider as you're kind of getting ready to open or thinking about opening. And then other things that you'll need to consider as you're kind of getting set up and as you're planning. And I would put all of this into like a big business planning document so that you can really like see how this will come together. But licensing, what type of licensing do you need in the space to run a yoga studio? Do you need any permits? Are there any zoning regulations? These are all things that you just want to check into before you're signing any contracts. You don't want to be locked into like a 1 or 2 year lease on a space and then find out, oh, this is actually not zoned for what I want to do, or the licensing and permits is going to take months and months. So just make sure you're checking with your local municipality and just getting this all set up beforehand. And again, there's people who can help you locally with this. We're not going to go into too much depth because it's just very, very different everywhere, how to do this and how it works. And zoning regulations and bylaws can be very different. Every city, town, state, province, country, all of it is very different. And then, of course, we want to consider insurance. You want to make sure that you are covered, that your space is insured, that you have insurance on your space, and then as well for actually teaching yoga. So for teaching yoga and running a studio, Be Yogi does cover studios. So this is a great place to start when it comes to insurance. You can head on over to beyogi.com/MBOM and you get a little discount using that link. They've kindly and generously offered that to us for years and years. So yeah, good place to start with insurance. And again, just to remind you guys, this is all stuff that should be done before you guys are actually opening or launching a studio. This is all like the pre-plan work. This is all stuff that's going to go into your business plan. This is stuff that you're going to show a bank if you're looking for any type of loan or anything like that. And it's all stuff that you just want to make sure that you've organized and understood and whatnot before you're actually getting down the path of signing contracts, signing leases, actually getting into creating your business and launching your business. So we've got a couple other things that I want to talk about that are really important. And the next thing is branding and marketing. So things like your name, your logo, your colors, your messaging, these are all going to be very, very important steps to think about when it comes to the actual launching of your business. So you really want to consider what you're going to call your studio. You want to get a basic logo design so that you can put that as signage. If you have windows, you can put it on windows. You want to have it on the door. Pick some colors. These are types of things that you want to have aligned across everything, like all of the colors, messaging, logos, name should be the same, like in your business as on your social media, as on your website, and all of that type of stuff. So, really important to spend a bit of time with this. And I'm going to put some links in the show notes to some specific marketing episodes that we have specifically around like branding and coming up with names, logos, colors, messaging, all that type of stuff, because I've done some really great interviews with specialists on this type of stuff that kind of walk through how to do this with our business. And I think that this is important for all various types of yoga businesses, but I think that this stuff is particularly important with a yoga studio because you're going to have multiple teachers who are kind of their own person with their own style of teaching and that type of thing, but they're going to be under the umbrella of whatever your yoga studio is. So very important to create something that you feel good about, that you're excited about, that you feel like that describes your studio and the vibe and all that type of stuff. The next thing you're going to want to consider is creating that website and having a booking system. Having a booking system is going to be very, very important for simplicity. We have to have a space that has our schedule on it online where people can click on it and they can register for the class they want. They can pay for it. They can fill out their waiver, all that type of stuff right there. So that makes it very, very simple and straightforward for you as the studio owner and also for you as a teacher when you're teaching classes and also for your other teachers. So I'm really excited to be partnered with Offering Tree for the Send Off series. And I'm really excited to share that they do have studio specific software. So this is going to be my go-to recommendation for all of you studio owners and potential studio owners out there. Like I've mentioned before, I've supported many studios over the years, and they would often complain that their studio management software was way too complex and way too expensive. Now that Offering Tree has Yoga Studio software available, you have a simple, easy to use software that doesn't break the bank, integrates right into your website, and has all of the features you need to run your studio. This includes critical functions like appointment scheduling, payment processing, membership management, and even marketing campaigns. Plus, Offering Tree offers staff logins, a branded app that makes it super simple for your students to register for classes, SMS texting, a co-op studio owner community, and studio coaching calls. You can learn more about the studio software on their website at offeringtree.com/yoga-studio-software. And of course, that link will be in the show notes. Or you can go ahead and get started today by signing up using my link at offeringtree.com/MBOM. Of course, my link always gives you a little bit of a discount to help you out as you get started on your business. And one of the things that I really love about what Offering Tree has done on their website at that link offeringtree.com/yoga-studio-software is they've actually put together a comparison of Offering Tree software compared to some of the other popular ones like MindBody, Wellness Living, Walla, Moments, and Arqueta. And I've used a few of these, and I've also practiced using basically all of them throughout my time as a yoga practitioner. And you can just see the pros and cons highlighted with each of them. So it just gives you a little breakdown, and that can really help you make your decision based on what you need in your studio, your budget, and the functions and features that you need. And it's really important that you spend some time doing some research on this and just comparing softwares and deciding which one has the functions and features as well as the pricing that you're looking for, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with this software. That's why I've done a lot of the research for you. I've tried a lot of these, and that's why I'm recommending the one that I like the most, which is Offering Tree. But it's important for you to make sure that it feels like a good fit for you, because you are going to be using this software a lot and your students are going to be spending a lot of time with this software. So it's important to make sure that you've got your website and your booking system set up, tested, integrated, all that type of stuff before you do launch your business. And I would say that it's really great to start doing this research in the initial phases of planning your business so you can understand what the cost of your software is going to be per month. You can put this into your monthly expenses. This is going to be something that you're going to want to understand, what you're going to use and how you're going to use it kind of before you get going. And then something that you really want to make sure that you've got set up, tested, ready to go before you actually launch. And this will be the same with the branding and marketing. This is something that you want to really get started with and start brainstorming and researching in those initial business plan phases, but something that you really want to make sure is like set up and ready to go before you actually launch. And then another pre launch consideration will be putting together a marketing plan. So, actually thinking about how you're going to market your business. So, things that you might want to consider with this are you going to be on social media? Are you going to create a separate Facebook and Instagram page for your yoga studio? What are the types of things that you want to share and talk about there? Are you going to have an email list? Are you going to collect emails for clients that are coming to the studio and then email them regularly about offerings and schedule updates and special events at the studio, et cetera, et cetera? Are you going to put posters around town to advertise your business? Are you going to have your other teachers talk about the classes that they're teaching at the studio and do a little bit of marketing for you? So I think it's really important to sit down and just think about how you want to market the studio on a greater level. And there's going to be kind of two aspects of your marketing. There's going to be how you actually want to launch your business to the world. So, a launch plan, which we can talk about in a second. And then also, kind of after the launch, what does your continuous marketing look like? Like, what is your plan for kind of keeping people engaged, getting new people through the door, et cetera, et cetera. So, really sitting down and thinking about this and thinking about how you want to do this and what platforms you want to do it on and what kind of excites you here. And I would say from my experience that having a website is a must. I would definitely have a website that people can go to. I think that having posters up around town can be really helpful, and having businesses that are local that are able to kind of cross promote your business and are willing to have maybe your class schedule up there can be very helpful for you, especially as you get started. I think social media is a great tool for businesses, so I would definitely recommend being on social media as a yoga studio. I think it can be very supportive for this type of business. And I particularly like Facebook and Instagram in this case. And I'm a huge fan of email newsletters. If you've listened to the show for a while, you know I am very pro having an email newsletter, whether or not you're an independent yoga teacher or a yoga studio. So I would for sure say having a email newsletter, and you can just email people even monthly or quarterly about things that are going on. I think a lot of the studios that I've worked with have done either weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly newsletters, and they've been able to grow quite big lists that have been just people are very engaged, they're very curious. And so I think that these tools can be very supportive in our businesses. And then I would say it's really important to think about your launch plan and how you actually want to put your business out there. So, thinking about, will you do a soft opening and just have kind of family and friends and some key people invited there? Are you going to do a grand opening, like a big open house? Are you going to have free classes? Are you going to invite local press? What is the type of vibe that you want with putting your studio out into the world? So, it's really important to kind of sit down and think about what your marketing plan is, both for your launch and then for after your launch to continue having people come through the door. So once you're at the stage where you know that you're going to open a yoga studio and you've got all of your plans in place and you know your location and that's all in the works and stuff like that, it's time to build out your ideal class schedule. So, this is where you get to decide what the ideal schedule is, both for you and for your other teachers, and of course, for your students. So, at this point, you've done some market research. You should have a good sense for what else is happening in the area, what your students are interested in, when your other teachers are available, all of that type of thing. And so, you want to start out building your schedule. A few things with this, especially as you start out. So, I would definitely encourage you to start small. So, starting with less classes is better than I think starting with more classes and getting really burnt out. Start with a smaller staff of teachers. Just start small and just really try things out. So, of course, people have told you what they're interested in, but oftentimes it's actions speak louder than words type of thing. So, somebody says, like, hey, I really want this class time. I really want this class time. But until they're actually coming to that class time, you know, there's no actual proof that that class time works. And so just trying things out is really important, and finding out what your people want and then adjusting and adding from there And so knowing that your class schedule is probably going to shift, the studios that I've worked with in the past have often shifted class schedules seasonally or every couple of months, like once a quarter type thing. And sometimes even more often than that, because sometimes we think something's going to work and we try it and we give it a month or two and it's just clearly not working. And so we decide to remove it from the schedule. So just know that even once you kind of get that class schedule established, there's going to be some changes that happened as you shift and grow and change. So it's kind of like an ever evolving and working document, but we have to start with something. So picking the times that work best for you, picking the times that seem to work best for your students, kind of those most popular times, and then launching with that, and then knowing that you can add and change from there. But knowing that it's just all a bit of trial and error. Similarly, of course, you are going to need to hire teachers. So, figuring out with your schedule how many classes you are going to teach, which types of classes you're going to teach, and then figuring out what gaps you need to fill from there. And deciding, do you know teachers that you want to hire? Are there teachers that you've worked with in the past that you want to hire? Or is it something where you're putting out into your community a call for teachers that you need more teachers? Most often, as yoga teachers, we have the teachers that we know we want to bring over to our studio that we know we want to hire. But if that's not the case for you, then of course, getting out into the community, putting ads up, yoga teachers will be thrilled, of course, to see ads for teaching opportunities. I mentioned this before, but thinking about if you need cleaning staff or karma cleaners, I think that if you can afford to have somebody to help you clean, I think this is really beneficial to take that hat off of you or that responsibility off of you. Having a clean studio space is going to be really important. Nobody likes to be doing a chaturanga and to look down and see or look up and see a dust bunny. That's just really, really yucky. It's really gross. Nobody wants to walk across the floor to and from their shoes and then feel like their feet have gotten dirty. So, keeping the space clean and tidy is going to be really important. If you don't want to hire cleaning staff, and this is something you'd like to get off of your plate, you can ask your teachers to do a little tidy up at the end of class. Like maybe you just keep a broom or a Swiffer around and they can just tidy a little bit. Or you can have karma cleaners. And this is something that the studios that I've worked with in the past have done, and this works really nicely. This would just be a few people who are volunteering to clean in exchange for memberships. So they can come to however many classes you agree upon in exchange for however many hours of cleaning. And then obviously they just have to be trained on what type of cleaning needs to be done. If this is bathrooms, change rooms, or just the studio space. And then specifically, are they cleaning down props? Are they organizing props? Are they sweeping? What are they doing? So just deciding what their responsibility is going to be. And I think that this is a really nice way to have it as an exchange rather than needing to pay cleaning staff to come, which obviously just has an extra cost for you, which can be tough as you're first starting out. So looking into the idea of having, maybe some students or some people who can't necessarily afford memberships but want to practice with you who might be interested in a couple hours a week of cleaning. Finally, you might want to consider if you want a studio manager. Do you want somebody who's going to be in the studio to do check-ins, to open the studio and close the studio after class? Is this something you're going to be doing? Are you going to put this responsibility in the hands of your teachers? Do you want somebody who can help you with the admin and checking of emails, posting on social media, all that type of stuff? I think that when we get started, we kind of want our hands in all these pots, right? Because we want to see what's happening. But over time, we realize that it's a lot. It's a lot of hats to wear to be the CEO of the business, to be a lead teacher of the business, to be the cleaning staff of the business, as well as the person who's running and managing everything. And so hiring somebody who can come in and can help you with this type of stuff can be really, really helpful. And my experience working with studios has been that I've never done it full time. It's always been a part-time gig. So know that you can get somebody for 5, 10, 15 hours a week. And that type of thing is going to help out a ton in terms of coordinating schedule changes, training teachers in terms of using software, coordinating your karma cleaners, checking your emails, keeping your inbox running smoothly, posting on social media every day, and all that type of stuff. It really makes a huge difference so we can focus on our zone of genius, which is teaching and running our studio, right? So these are some things to consider. And obviously, having that budget in your business plan is going to be really helpful. And then you can do a little bit of trial and error with things and just kind of see how it goes. Know that it's going to take like a couple of months, if not a couple of years, to kind of get your feet beneath you and to really feel like, hey, I got the hang of this running a yoga studio thing. Another thing to consider, and this is really related to the episodes we did on expanding our offerings, is as a studio, it's really important that you expand your offerings too, offering workshops, events, trainings, and privates. These are really great ways to add to our income and to just give our students more opportunities to practice with us. And the great thing about expanding your business as a yoga studio is that your other teachers can help out with this stuff. So you probably have teachers who are interested in expanding their business. So they might be interested in teaching privates in the space or running workshops or running trainings or doing events. And the way that we can have this be a really agreeable exchange for both the studio and the teacher is to do some sort of a split on the profits. I think that having a 70-30 split or an 80-20 split with the teacher taking the majority of that, the teacher who's running the event, can be really great. So we kind of have like a fee for them using the space. We get a little bit of kickback for that. And they get to make the majority of that, obviously, for their efforts. So I feel like that can be a really big win-win. This is not something you have to start doing right away, but just something to start thinking about once you have done all your preliminary stuff, once you've actually launched your business, once you're marketing it, once you've got your class schedule, your teachers, all that stuff kind of sorted and you feel like, hey, I've got a good handle on this. Maybe it's time to expand a little bit. But just like I was saying before with privates, these types of things are really great for filling the gaps because we have this space, right? And there's hours in the day when it's just sitting empty. So if there's something we can do with that time that can generate income and serve our students, I think that that's a beautiful thing to be able to do. One of the other things that might be a little bit of trial and error for you, but something that you really will need to consider as you enter studio ownership is balancing your own teaching with managing a studio. And one of the great things about being a studio owner is that you can kind of choose your ideal schedule a little bit and you can kind of make that work around your schedule and any other obligations that you have in your life. And I feel like this works really well, especially for parents who have children that they're responsible for. But I think the biggest thing here is kind of getting a sense for how much actual management there is going to be of the studio. And of course, this is going to depend on if you have help with anything or not. There's a lot of things that go into running a studio on top of just the day-to-day operations of the studio, things like bookkeeping and accounting and payroll and making sure that your teachers are all happy. So making sure that you get together for regular staff meetings, but not too regular staff meetings, and attending to students and student complaints and student needs. All of that takes time and attention. So there is a lot that goes into running the studio outside of just the teaching aspect. So maybe you start by teaching 10 classes a week. You quickly realize that that's too much while actually managing the studio. So you bring in other teachers to help and kind of scale it back to maybe 5 classes a week. So, you can kind of do a little bit of trial and error with this, but just remember that there will be a little bit of balance that needs to happen with this in order to find your kind of ideal schedule so that you're not just working crazy hours like 6 in the morning till 10 p.m. at night, just doing studio stuff all day, teaching and managing and all those types of things. What we want to try to avoid is overworking ourselves and burning ourselves out. And so one of my tips for you here is to really set boundaries. It's really important to set boundaries around your schedule. So trying not to jump in and teach classes unless you absolutely need to. Trying to make sure that you have boundaries with your other teachers so that you're not, spending too much time at the studio just chatting with them or mentoring them or whatever. Of course, a little bit of this is all fine, but we just want to make sure that we do have boundaries around our time, our energy. And then, of course, we have to have boundaries around our students. And this is something we know as teachers. We can't be at the studio an hour early, just visiting with students, and then same an hour late. And I know that this is hard when we genuinely like the people and we want to build these relationships and all these types of things, but we do have to make sure that we find that balance of not overworking ourselves, not burning the candle at both ends, and ultimately not burning out. So just make sure you are setting those boundaries. And of course, asking for help when you need it. We don't have to do it all. We can bring in karma cleaners. We can bring in other teachers. We can bring in help, somebody who can help manage your emails, help manage your social media. That gives you more time and attention to do the bigger picture work, to do the bigger picture marketing plan, to teach great classes, to be that face of the studio and bring more students in. Hiring an accountant who can help you with your taxes every year. In the greater scheme of things, this is such a small investment that can help so much with your business. So just really keeping that in mind. And then another thing that I think is really important to talk about is the importance of building long-term relationships. And so I think that thinking about each student as potentially like a lifelong customer, or at least a long-term customer, is really important. So when somebody comes in for that first visit, really getting to know their name, asking them questions about themselves and their yoga experience, giving them a really great experience. And then, of course, having things set up within your business so that it urges them to continue coming back. And this is something that's really cool that you can do with your software, is that you can have automatic emails set up to go out to your customers. So after they've taken their first class, maybe they get an email offering them a discount off their next package or something like that. And I think that having especially monthly auto renew packages can be really helpful. Once you can get people on those memberships, that's when they become your loyal customers. And once they become your loyal customers, that's when they can start helping you do marketing. And this is like not something we talk about with them, right? This is just something that happens when people love businesses. They start giving you positive testimonials. They start referring their friends and family to you. They start referring people that they know to you. And so we really want to build up that customer loyalty. We really want to nurture these relationships, build these loyal customers that are going to be lifelong customers to your business. And then even getting things like if somebody says something great or a compliment about your studio via email or in person, asking them if you can use that as a testimonial for your social media, for your emails, for your website. And then you can also do things like incentivizing referrals. That can be great. So, hey, anyone who refers a friend, if they come back with your name, they'll get 50% off a class pack and you'll get 10% off your next month with us. Something like that can be really helpful. I've also found that things like community building, evenings where we do things like 108 ohms or 108 sun salutations, and it can either be free or by donation, and we choose a charity to donate money to. These things can really bring people together, as well as we've done lots of yoga challenges that can have really fun twists and fun elements to them, like getting creative with doing 30 days of yoga or yoga 3 days a week or something like that. So I would definitely explore how you can just create this community feel, this community vibe, and really build loyalty with your customers through various activities and incentives like that. All right, friends, it's really important not to overinvest too fast. So I am a big fan of investing in your business, but I think that it's important for you, like we've talked about, to sit down before you even sign the lease on the space, to really have a clear business plan, to have a clear marketing plan, to really understand what your budget is, how much you need to bring in, how many classes you need, how many people per class, et cetera, et cetera. Start small and go from there. We're not going to start with a team of like 15 teachers that we're paying the highest rate in town for. We'll start with like one or two that can help us out and maybe a couple of karma cleaners. Do a lot yourself in the beginning, try a lot of things, and then as you go, you can invest. You don't need to run, thousands of dollars worth of Facebook ads or anything like that. Just go door to door in your community to like-minded businesses, invite people to your launch event, your soft or your hard launch event, and invite them to your studio, invite them to come try a class. Like, do these kind of simple techniques that have been done time and time again that work really well. And just know that you don't have to make these like big over investments too quickly, as well as stay aligned with your values as you grow. And I think it's really important, like we talked about at the beginning, to be very clear on what your values are and what your mission is. This is something that I work with yoga teachers on, that I train. We always sit down and do our values, and we always do our mission statement. And I think it's so important to come back to this when you're building your business. And as things are growing and as things are taking off and as you're presented with more opportunities, just stay aligned with their values. Your values are your North Star, and they're always going to guide you as long as you stay true to them. And of course, you don't need to have it all figured out to begin. Start small, learn as you go, find mentors, find business coaches, find other studio owners that are willing to talk to you. Even if they're not in your community, there's so many support networks, there's Facebook communities, there's lots of resources out there to help you. And so find other like-minded people that you can talk to, that you can have a conversation with, find business coaches that specialize in this, and just go out and make it happen. If you can dream it, you can plan it, you can launch it. I have so much faith in you guys, and I'm so excited to see what you create. I have lots of resources for you. I have done so many interviews with studio owners, and they have shared so much goodness with me. So you can head on over to mbomyoga.com/studios. There's a few of my own resources there for you. And then at the bottom, there is a little section that you can click on that has all the podcast episodes that are related to yoga studios, launching yoga studios, growing yoga studios, all that type of thing. So regardless of what level of studio ownership you're at, there's something for you. There's some knowledge that you can take away. And all these studio owners are always willing to talk to people. So there's contact information in the podcast episodes. If you guys need anything, make sure you reach out. And yeah, that's it on studio ownership. I hope that this has been helpful. I know this episode has been long with lots of information, but we've covered a lot of different topics, and I'm just really excited to be supporting you on your yoga studio journey. As always, if you have any questions or comments or feedback, please be in touch, info@mbomyoga.com. A huge thank you to my sponsor, Offering Tree. Make sure you guys go check them out, offeringtree.com/mbom. And of course, thank you so much for listening. I'm so grateful that you're here, and I will see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.